Hi, my name is Lynda Downing, and I'm here to talk about my case study for supervision and evaluation for EDL 851. So let's talk about and summarize the case. First, we have an unknown school district. Much is unknown. We don't know if it's large or small, rural or urban, and what are the school district's policies regarding evaluations. Next, we have the unknown school. So not much is known. I have a lot of questions about that. So how many staff members or teachers are there? How many administrators? Are there any instructional coaches? Is there a mentorship program, especially for new teachers? Is there any professional development? And if so, what type? Is it just your traditional sit and get model, or is professional learning promoted? Are staff allowed or encouraged to participate in peer observations in school or in other school or school districts? How often do principals or school leaders conduct walkthroughs? Are staff members given feedback of any type? Are they given meaningful, timely, ongoing, consistent, constructive, actionable feedback? Are teachers required to turn in lesson plans on a regular basis? Have teachers completed their curriculum mapping, the curriculum mapping process? What is the school culture? And what is the climate like? Is it collaborative, or do teachers just stay in their rooms and worry about themselves? Next, we have the principal. Obviously, we know he's a male based on the pronouns that they use. He was in a rush to complete the evaluation process and the evaluation forms for the new teachers in the building. He was very pleased with the group of new teachers that he had hired, with the exception of Mrs. Stevens. He noticed that she struggles with student engagement and classroom management. He has found Mrs. Stevens difficult to work with and prickly. He has observed her many times. He's noticed that most students seem disinterested in the classroom proceedings, and many of them hardly bother going through the motion or responding when the teacher called on them. Each time before entering Mrs. Stevens' classroom, there was an unusual amount of noise coming from inside. The students were talking at will, and there seemed to be considerable movement. The students showed little respect for their teacher. She seemed to exert little influence over them. But there is a question about feedback. Did he provide any, and if he did, was it meaningful to her? Did he follow any evaluation process protocol? He has decided to recommend that her contract not be renewed, which she did not take well. She threatened to take it to court if necessary. All right, now we'll talk about Mrs. Stevens, the teacher. Much is unknown. This is her first year as a teacher at the unknown school. It's unknown what subject areas she teaches. She's intelligent and has excellent background knowledge in her subject area. She's struggling with student engagement and classroom management. She has been deemed difficult to work with by the principal. She did state in a post-visitation conference that there was no conclusive research that would prove classroom achievement dependent on student improvement. Interesting statement, I thought. So does she have a great knowledge in her subject area, but a very little in the art of teaching and student engagement? According to her, she has received no real helpful supervision. She has not received any practical ideas on how to involve her students more. Her contract was not renewed based on observations done by the principal and using a lackluster evaluation form, by the way. Her reaction to learning that her contract would not be renewed became confrontational. Why? My question is why? Why did she become confrontational? Was she just so frustrated? Did she ask for help and she didn't receive it, and that's why her response was really unprofessional and very inappropriate? And she did threaten to take the issue to court. So now we have the question of Mrs. Stevens' supervisor. That person is only mentioned in the text once by Mrs. Stevens. Mrs. Stevens stated the supervisor was no help to her. So what does this person do? I have no idea. Next, new teacher support. Much is unknown. And how are the new teachers supported? Do they each have a mentor? Do they each have a supervisor? We don't really know much about that at all. Next, let's talk about legal and ethical issues. First, we're going to talk about Kansas tenure. Tenure, a very stitchy situation. A number of years ago, the state of Kansas chose to eliminate Kansas tenure. Previously, a teacher was granted tenure in the state of Kansas after 3 consecutive years in a given school district. During the first 3 years of teaching before reaching tenure, a teacher could be dismissed or renewed for any reason. With the removal of tenure, teachers Kansas teachers no longer have access to due process when their contracts are not renewed. Next, ethical concerns. Okay, let's talk about that evaluation itself. Personality, really? I find that statement so unethical. I would hope that there is more to this evaluation form than what was shown, but even if there was, it does not even meet a minimal standard of effectiveness. There are only 3 columns in the rubric. I would hope a school district would want teachers who are greater than above average. Also, no clear explanation of what teachers are doing well and what they might need to work on. Frankly, I would be embarrassed to use this form. In fact, the district would find I would have a great intractability if I was required to use this form to evaluate my staff and my teachers. Next, we have the school board master policy. Does the school board support the use of this evaluation form? And what are the procedures and protocols for evaluations, walkthroughs, and giving feedback? And now let's talk about teacher unions. Mrs. Stevens does not have tenure in the state of Kansas, as no teacher does. However, she could belong to a teachers union. A teacher union such as NEA or KNEA will help teachers with litigation and wrongful termination. Therefore, Mrs. Stevens may be a member or may become a member and choose to take the issues to the court system. She may be blowing off steam and it's maybe all bluff or maybe it's not. If I was a principal, I would be very concerned, especially about the evaluation form. What a joke. All right, let's synthesize what's happened. After many observations and completing the evaluation process, the principal decided to recommend not renewing the contract of Mrs. Stevens, but upon hearing this news, reacted poorly and stated she would take the issue to court if necessary. So let's talk about who was involved. Of course, first we have Mrs. Stevens. So much is unknown. We don't know how old she is teaching her first profession. She seems to use her traditional model of lecturing as her teaching strategy. How long has she been teaching? What subject does she teach? If it's science, you might want to think again. Science teachers are rare indeed. What was her past teaching? Was it unconventional? Has she received meaningful, actionable feedback from her supervisor and the principal and choose to ignore it? Or was unsure how to implement the feedback? What kind of professional development as a new teacher has she received? Has she been observed by peers or had the opportunity to observe a peer herself? And does she have a mentor or access to an instructional coach? Has she had a chance to create relationships with other staff members? Does she feel comfortable at that school? Has she been treated fairly at school? Has she been excluded due to the color of her skin or her sexual orientation? Does she feel supported or does she feel isolated in her room? What does her supervisor say about her? That's not mentioned. Her evaluation form states she has average relationships with students, parents, fellow teachers, and administrators. So what is the feedback from parents? How do her students really feel about her? Has anyone been building her capacity to meet her full potential as an educator? So now let's talk about the principal himself. No, we don't know. We know that he's male. We don't know how old he is, how long he's been a principal, how many years of experience does he have in the education field. Is he supportive of his staff? Does he help manage classroom behaviors? What kind of support, if any, has he given to Mrs. Stevens? Has he discussed his concerns with her supervisor? Did he go out of his way to try to create a relationship with her? How does his staff feel about him? Is he well liked? Is he seen as impartial and fair? Does he work to create meaningful relationships with all staff and students? And does he promote the well-being of his staff and the students in his building? Now let's talk about the supervisor. It's completely unknown. It's mentioned obviously just once in the resource. And what if the problem is with the supervisor? Are they following the specific directives from the principal? What if they're untruthful about not implementing those directives? And lastly, we have the superintendent. We have no idea. Obviously there is one, but nothing is mentioned in the resource. So where is this happening? In an unknown school district. So it would be nice to know who's the superintendent, how involved is the superintendent in the schools, how many employees are there overall, how many students do they serve, and how many schools are there. Now we have the unknown school. Again, so many questions. This case study left me with so many questions. Is it rural or urban? Is it large or small? What is the student population? How many are on free and reduced lunches? Is there a diverse population of students? How many staff members? How many teachers? Are most teachers new teachers or veteran teachers? Does the school promote distributed leadership? Is there a mentorship program? If so, is it effective and meaningful? Is there a diverse population of staff members? Do the staff reflect the diversity of the student population? How many administrators are there, and what are their duties? Is there a school well or poor performing? Does the school district struggle adequately to staff that school? Are there instructional coaches? If so, how many? Are there guidance counselors? If so, how many? What is their role in the school? Do they counsel students, or they just handle scheduling? Is the building old or new? Is it accessible to all students and staff? Is the school set up by teams, and are their classrooms arranged accordingly? Is there a technology readily accessible to staff and students, and what electives are offered? See, so many questions. What does the professional development look like? Is it traditional sit and get? Is it professional learning promoted? How are the needs of teachers assessed? Is this information used to create professional development and opportunities? What is the culture of the school? Does the administrator work to create a collaborative, inclusive, and a diverse culture? How often are administrators in the classrooms? Are walkthroughs done consistently? Are walkthroughs done by multiple observers or only one? Are all teachers given actionable feedback in a timely, constructive, consistent manner? What is the evaluation process? Are the evaluation protocols for the school district followed? How is the information gathered from the evaluation process used? What are the school initiatives? What are their foundational structures for KISA? How are those being promoted? Are teachers required to turn in lesson plans? Have all curriculum maps been completed for a subject? And are the curriculum maps aligned between the grade levels in specific subject areas? So many questions. Okay, the principal's office. It's not mentioned in the case study. Well, it is mentioned in the case study that they actually meet in his office. But here's a question. Does the principal have an open door policy? Is he a good source of support and meaningful feedback to his staff? Does he spend all his time in his office, or is he seen throughout the building? And next, we have her classroom. We do know she uses a traditional model of teaching, but the question is, are all classrooms accessible to all students and staff? Are the rooms comfortable? Do they have windows? Are the classrooms arranged by teams or departments? So many questions. So what programs are involved? Okay, we have the unknown school district. It's not mentioned. But I have a question. Is the evaluation form presented? Is that all there is? What is the procedure for evaluations, walkthroughs, feedback, and staff? And what does the master policy handbook say about evaluations? The unknown school. Okay, so we need to know if the teacher's curriculum maps and if they've done their curriculum map and assessment mapping. Do teachers work in teams? Okay, we pretty much asked those questions. So who is Mrs. Stevens' supervisor? And does every teacher have one? And the administrative staff. Much is unknown. We only know the principals mentioned in the case study. Is he the only one? Who are the supervisors? What are their role? Are there instructional coaches, and what is their role? So let's review and analyze. So we'll talk about the stakeholders. Once again, we're in an unknown town. It's not mentioned in the case study. It's not known if it's large or small or rural or urban, and we don't know the diversity of the town's population. Second, the parents. They're not mentioned in the case study either. It can be assumed that if parents have been concerned about Mrs. Stevens, that they have definitely discussed this with the principal. The school board. The school board, once again, is not mentioned in the study. We'll assume that it's an elected school board and not appointed. Is there a parent from an unknown school on the school board? How many minorities on the school board, or are they all Caucasian? Are minorities adequately presented in the running of the school district? And does the board value professional education in the staff, and are they willing to help pay for it? Community members. Once again, they're not mentioned. However, it is no doubt that the unknown town schools are important to community members. Often schools are a major employer in both towns, large and small. The superintendent, once again, is not mentioned in the case study. The staff of the unknown school. It's not mentioned in the case study. I do have a question about, if they have counselors, how many principals, the number of teachers per grade. They are elective teachers, number of special educators, number of office staff, number of paras, both special education and otherwise. And lastly on this slide, the staff itself of the unknown school district. So how many of them, and how many are a number of minorities as teachers in higher level positions? Are they well paid? Is the pay fair and based on experience? Okay, so what are the responsibilities of a principal for helping a teacher become more effective? They need to be building and sustaining a school vision. School principals who focus on a vision in their schools nurture the leadership capabilities of their teachers. They need to promote a shared leadership, guiding a school staff to reach common vision requires intensive and sustained collaboration. Tapping the experts of teacher leaders. As key instructional leaders, principals share their leadership with teachers to promote reflection and collaborative investigation to improve teaching and learning. That's something easily this principal could have been doing to help Mrs. Stevens. Collaborating and leading. Effective instructional leaders believe that staff should collaborate and openly discuss instruction and program administration collectively among all stakeholders. Teachers as learners. Principals also need to mobilize teachers' energies and capacities, something that I don't think that was happening for Mrs. Stevens. Using data to make instructional decisions. To use the appropriate data helps to maintain consistent focus on improving teaching and learning. They also need to be monitoring curriculum and instruction. Principals support instructional activities and programs by modeling expected behaviors, participating in staff development, and consistently prioritizing instructional concerns on a day-to-day basis. Principals are in a good position to support teachers' effectiveness through observation and conversations with teachers. And lastly, visiting classrooms. Principals need to build trust by supporting and nurturing teacher development, by providing feedback that helps teachers improve. Okay, so how do you build capacity in new teachers? First of all, you need to treat new teachers as a precious commodity that they are, and you need to be patient. New teachers are difficult to find these days. Provide mentors for the new teacher on how to navigate the school, and provide a checklist for that mentor. Value the knowledge of experienced teachers and allow and promote peer observations. Provide mentors who have experience in the same subject or field and work with other districts if needed. I think that would have been really helpful to Mrs. Stevens. Provide opportunities for students to build relationships with colleagues in other schools, even if it's only to observe one day. And build their confidence. Encourage participation in shared leadership professional learning communities. So how does one conduct frequent classroom visits, walkthroughs, and observations to provide constructive, meaningful, actionable feedback that supports the development of faculty and staff? First, we'll talk about walkthroughs. Walkthroughs must be focused. You need to make sure that you're looking only for a couple things and not everything. Walkthroughs must be formative. We need to see an accurate picture of the classroom, and hopefully we know what's happening on a daily basis when we're not in the room. Walkthroughs must be targeted. They focus on the progress made since the last walkthrough visit, or professional development to meet teachers' needs. Identify specific leadership action necessary to support the improvement of teacher practice. And we need to make sure that we're observing every single classroom at multiple times during the day and at multiple times during the hour, so you can see how things are going. Next, let's talk about the evaluation tool. You need to understand your evaluation tool, and hopefully it's effective. You need to visit, obviously, the classrooms early and often. Observe everything, not just the teacher. Provide immediate feedback. Try to find the root cause if something seems to be going poorly in their classroom. And definitely provide opportunities to improve and grow. Next, let's talk about feedback. You need to offer feedback that's actionable and can provide employees with a clear path forward to their development. Effective feedback is concrete, specific, and useful, and it provides an actionable information. The objective of the actionable feedback are to influence future behaviors and improve the quality of the teacher's work. So what is the school board and administrative policy in my district in regard to classroom visitations into supervision and evaluation? I'm just going to read the highlighted portion here. I don't think we necessarily need to get into all of that. The philosophy of the Board of Education concerning the evaluation of employees is to provide a structure in which improvement may be realized. And next, we have evaluation data will be used to promote improvement of instruction through follow-up conferences. All right, let's talk about next. Okay, so let's talk about the different options that I came up with. The first option is you can do absolutely nothing. You can just let it ride and hope that she was just blowing off steam and she just leaves your building and that's the end of it. It keeps the peace. The pros is it keeps the peace and it's probably easier for the time being. And the cons, he will not be doing his job to the best of his ability. He may be in litigation with Mrs. Stevens by the end of the year. Ms. Stevens will need to be replaced, which may be more difficult, especially if she's a science or math teacher, and it does damage his reputation as a fair and impartial school leader. So my next option, I call it the laissez-faire option, laissez-faire approach. You could definitely have a discussion with the superintendent about Mrs. Stevens. He may choose not to renew her contract due to her poor attitude, and it's out of your hands anyway. So he would have, the principal would have a conversation with Mrs. Stevens and tell her you've changed your mind and you would like her to stay, but you have no plan for her success. You just let her stay and hope for the best, and maybe she'll get tired of being there because maybe she realizes maybe she's not as effective as she could be, and she'll just eventually go away. It is easier for the principal, but the superintendent may choose not to renew her. The cons, there's no plan for change. It sets up Mrs. Stevens for failure, along with the students that she's going to have in her classrooms. It damages the relationships, it damages the principal's reputation, and it damages the school's reputation. All right, let's talk about my option that I would like to do. Okay, so first off, we're going to talk to the superintendent. We're going to have a discussion about Mrs. Stevens, and once again, he or she may choose to non-renew her because of her poor attitude, and there's really not much more you can do about that. The other thing I would talk to him about or her about is the evaluation tool and its limitations and lack of effectiveness. I would propose working with the superintendent and other administrators to adopt a new evaluation tool. Okay, then I would propose my plan for working with Mrs. Stevens. I would definitely use a team approach, basically create a plan of assistance for her. Mrs. Stevens and myself will work on building her teaching capacity by having her work with a mentor, instructional coach if available. Myself, her supervisor and instructional coach, will complete a walkthrough weekly during different times during the day. After each walkthrough, Mrs. Stevens will receive a meaningful, actionable feedback via email in a timely, consistent manner. She will also have an opportunity to meet with each of us on a weekly basis to discuss and unpack that feedback. Mrs. Stevens will have a professional learning opportunities which will be developed based on her walkthrough feedback and additional opportunities for her team that her team feels appropriate. The team will focus on her trying new strategies for student engagement and classroom management. Mrs. Stevens will be allowed the opportunity to complete peer observations with other professionals of her choice and her team's choice. It will be recommended she complete a peer observation at least once a month. Mrs. Stevens will have the opportunity to participate in peer evaluations with another teacher in her subject matter to be determined by her team. Mrs. Stevens will have a formal evaluation during the first and second semester. The principal will use an updated evaluation tool. The principal will meet with Mrs. Stevens' team, with the instructional coach, supervisor, and mentor, either collaboratively or individually on a weekly basis. Then I would have a discussion with the instructional coach and her supervisor. I would have obviously a discussion with them both and what my plan is and how I would like to move forward with Mrs. Stevens. I would schedule weekly meetings to discuss the process or lack of process on the teachers they coach and supervise. As a team, we will create a walkthrough template for new teachers. We will also work on an evaluation tool or do research for one that fits our needs. Next, I would have a conversation. I would have a talk with Mrs. Stevens. I would have to have a very frank discussion with Mrs. Stevens. First, the principal will discuss the importance of her professional attitude and a willingness to take feedback. Mrs. Stevens will be given the opportunity to voice any concerns or opinions she might have. It will be important to discuss that the principal would like her to succeed and has a plan to help Mrs. Stevens be more effective in the classroom with student engagement and student management. The principal will discuss the plan and will have a willingness to make any adjustments which will be to the satisfaction of both parties. Have Mrs. Stevens sign that she agreed to the plan and any changes that have been made to the plan. Be sure to email a copy to the superintendent. Here's one caveat in all of this, though. If Mrs. Stevens continues to be hostile, unwilling to make a change and follow the plan, the principal may choose to continue with his first course of action, which was to actually not renew her. So let's talk about the pros and cons of that. The pros is it maintains the reputation as a fair and impartial leader, and you will not have to replace Mrs. Stevens, and it maintains their relationships. The cons is Mrs. Stevens may choose to continue her course of action. So, how do I implement my decision? First, check board policies on supervision, evaluation, and walkthroughs. Obviously, have my discussion with the superintendent. Continue to communicate with the superintendent on a daily basis via email or in person. I will need to develop, implement, and monitor a plan of assistance for Mrs. Stevens using a team approach. I will develop and implement a plan for monitoring whether supervision and evaluation strategies have been effective in improving Mrs. Stevens, engaging students, and having better classroom management. The meetings that I will need to have is obviously Mrs. Stevens' supervisor, instructional coach or coaches, the department chair of Mrs. Stevens' subject area, a staff member who is or is a good candidate for mentorship with Mrs. Stevens, and Mrs. Stevens herself. The principal would meet Mrs. Stevens' team, instructional coach, supervisor, and mentor, either collaboratively or individually. And having a willingness to change or modify a plan on an as-needed basis. And lastly, have patience. Change takes time. So thank you very much for listening to my case study. And that's all.